On Monday afternoon, the 25th of March, 1839, a singular robbery was effected. It appears that 2 boxes of gold dust from the mines of the Brazilian Mining Company in South America had reached England on the 18th of the month and had been landed at Falmouth from HMS Seagull, from whence they were to be forwarded to London, consigned to Marsh and Company, the agents of the mining concern. At Falmouth, they were put on board the City of Limerick steamship, and on Monday morning, the 25th of March, they were landed at the wharf of the Dublin Steam Packet Company at St. Catherine's. On the same morning, a letter was received by Messrs. Hartley and Company, the agents of the Dublin Steam Navigation Company, purporting to be from Carn and Company of Falmouth, apprising them of the transmission of the gold dust and instructing them to hand it over to a person who should call at their office and produce certain documents. This letter was opened by Lewin Casper, a clerk in the establishment, and on the same afternoon a person drove up to the counting house and, presenting certain papers, desired that the boxes of precious metal should be delivered to him. From his manner, no suspicion was raised, and the credentials which he produced, giving a description of the boxes and the marks upon them, tended to remove all doubt as to the authenticity of the character which he had assumed. His right to the boxes, therefore, being apparently established, he paid the wharfage dues, and the trunks with their golden contents were placed in the cab in which he had arrived. He gave the foreman of the wharf a shilling for his civility, and then drove away, without the smallest suspicion being excited that he was not fully entitled to the goods which he had claimed. However, in a few hours an authorized agent, the consignees, arrived, and making known his character and demanding the gold dust upon the authority of vouchers which he produced, the fraud was discovered. The contents of the boxes were valued at £4,600, and as this loss would fall upon the Dublin Steam Packet Company, the consternation which was created among their servants at this event may be well imagined. Instant steps were taken to secure the individual by whom the robbery had been so ingeniously effected. Police officers Leah and Rowe were engaged to pursue the necessary investigation. In the course of the same day, the cab which had conveyed the thief to Hartley's Wharf was discovered, and the driver questioned. But the only information which he could afford was that the individual who had employed him had hired him in Cheapside, and he had driven him back to Wood Street, where he had quitted his vehicle and had entered another cab. A clue so vague was not easily to be followed, but the officers pursued their investigation with unabated vigor and determination, and at length, after infinite difficulty, they traced the thief to number 12 New Street, London Hospital, from whence they found he had now removed to a house in Mansell Street with all his furniture, but from which again he had absconded no one knew whither. From the inquiries made by the officers, they ascertained that the name of this person was Moss, and that he was foreman to Mr. Hyams, a watchmaker in Goodman's Fields, that before the robbery, as well as on the day of its commission, he had been observed to be in frequent and earnest conversation with Ellis Casper, whose son, Lewin Casper, as we have already stated, held the situation of confidential clerk to Hartley and Company. No time was lost in taking these persons into custody, and then it was elicited from the servant of Moss that both those individuals had occasionally visited her master, that on the day of the robbery, Moss, contrary to custom, went out in his best clothes, and that in the evening he came home in a cab with 2 boxes corresponding in appearance with those which had contained the gold dust. In the course of the inquiries which were now made, the circumstance of the purchase of a large quantity of bar gold by Bull and Company, bullion dealers, from Henry Solomons, a gold refiner, was elicited, and Bull and Company instantly afforded every assistance to the police. On Saturday, the 6th of April, Solomons was examined at Lambeth Street Police Office, when he admitted having sold £1,200 worth of bar gold to Bull, but he stated that that gold was the produce of a large quantity of snuff boxes and other articles which he had melted. But finally, he protested against being further questioned and refused to give any more information upon the subject. At a subsequent examination, Solomons was placed at the bar with the 2 Caspers as a principal in the robbery, and then Moss, who, upon an understanding that he should be admitted in evidence against the prisoners, had surrendered himself into custody appeared as a witness. On Tuesday, May the 7th, 2 new prisoners were placed at the bar, named Emmanuel Moses, or Money Moses, as he was familiarly called, and Alice Abrahams, his daughter, who was a widow. But as there were still other parties not in custody who had been participators in the transaction, it was deemed advisable that secrecy should still be observed upon the subject of the evidence which had been obtained. From other witnesses, however, the fact of the sale of a large quantity of gold dust by Moses and his daughter to Solomons directly after the robbery was elicited, and it was also shown that the latter, in melting it down, had thrown copper and silver into it in order to change its exact character and thereby prevent its identification. On Tuesday, 2nd July, the case was left to the jury. His lordship's charge occupied a period of 8 hours, and at its conclusion, the jury retired. In about an hour, however, they again came into court and delivered guilty verdict. The learned judge then sentenced the men to be transported for 14 years and Alice Abrahams to 4 months' imprisonment. Hartley and Company, upon whom the loss would have fallen in case of the non-recovery of the gold, suffered comparatively small damage. A very considerable portion of the gold itself was produced, and for that which was not actually forthcoming, there is good reason to suppose that an equivalent was eventually paid.